The global pandemic has affected economies across Africa. This, coupled with Russia-Ukraine war, conflicts across African continent, as well as droughts and some climate change-induced factors, have significantly challenged African countries' economies, including Ethiopia. A very warm welcome to you, dear viewers. This is ETV Special Edition, and I'm Santayo Tamrat with this edition. And this edition will try to see the challenges of Ethiopian economy and also the Russia-Ukraine war impact on African economy. So my guest today is Dr. Addis Kasaun, who is Chief Economist, and he will tell us more about himself. Thank you again for watching us. A very warm welcome to you, Dr. Addis.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Can you just tell my audience a little bit about yourself?
Okay, my name is Dr. Addis Kasaun. I'm a Managing Director for Kilimanjaro Trading and Consulting Firm. It's a private firm and company working on business and economics, and also providing trainings in various areas. And the last 10 years we have been operating in private settings.
And also just heard about you are just working with the United Nations, World Bank, USAID, and so on.
Yeah, I have been the last 2 decades. I have been working in the private sector in IT companies, and after that I joined the development world with international NGOs. And after working a couple of years and joined with UN system, United Nations, UNAIDS, and Global Fund Program. Then after a while I went to Tanzania to join World Bank and served there as Deputy Coordinator of the regional program, which is a World Bank Finances program for Ethiopia, Kenya, and Tanzania. After that, then I joined USAID as Deputy Country Director, working for health program in Ethiopia for 2 years. Then I joined PhD. After that, really when I got opportunity to get courses in entrepreneurship, then I decided that I have to leave and really follow a journey of self-employment.
That's really great experience. Well, let's start our discussion with the challenges the Ethiopian economy is currently facing. How do you describe that?
Yeah, the last couple of years, Ethiopia has been really facing a difficult challenge, starting from the COVID-19 pandemic. Then following that, we also faced a war in northern part of Ethiopia, which is affecting not only the northern part of Ethiopia, but the whole country. You know, people are contributing their part to the war. So we have been in a war economy. When you are in a war economy, that means the economy is channeling all its human and material resources to the war. So we have to defend our country from both internal and external. So that was a challenge for the country. But that also has a severe consequence, or humanitarian consequences. Because of that, as you may be aware of that, peoples are being displaced in all Amhara and Afar regions, and also in Oromia and Benishangul. So you can see coupled with the natural disasters, with flood, drought, those incidents also affecting the economy of Ethiopia for the last 2 and 3 years. So we have been in a chain of challenges. So the economy has to withstand all these problems, and even externally, while we were building our Great Ethiopian Renaissance dams, there was a pressure from external for the Western world. So that also had an impact on economy, because many of our donors refrain from sending their money for Ethiopia, and the NGOs were dwindling. And so that has also an impact on the economy, one way or another.
These are just the major factors, I think, and we might have just to discuss about the inflation rate in Ethiopia. What's your observation on the current status of the inflation?
Yeah, it is evident that there are different factors. All those factors have contributed for this because in Ethiopia, during even the war, the Ethiopian farmers in the north were fighting the war. They abandoned their farming and fighting, so there was shortage of production and productivity in Ethiopia. That is a major factor for high price increase. It is not, the inflation is not something which started yesterday. It has been for a long time, and it was increasing, and it reached to double digits. So the war in Ukraine now worsened the situation. So it has reached, unbearable level for Ethiopian peoples who are poor. As you can see that the 25% of the Ethiopian populations live below 1.90 US$ poverty line. That means out of more than 100 million people, 25 billion under $1.90 per day threshold. That means the impact of inflation is severe. So given that, the government has to do all the best to really support the people to withstand and pass this difficult time in our history.
Some people are just saying the current status of Ethiopian inflation is stagflation. First, what is the concept of stagflation? And then, is Ethiopia at that status?
I think first, what is stagflation? Stagflation, the words, can be known for us in 1975, the economic crisis in the world, that recession. During that times, stagflation reveals that persistent inflation combined with declining demand, consumer demand. That means decline, the great problems in aggregate demand. That means there is a downturn of economic growth for 5 and more quarters consistently. When you see the Ethiopian economy in that light, there is inflation, high inflation, but it is not combined with persistent economic downturn. Because as you can see from the government estimates, the Ethiopian GDP growth is 6.6. The World Bank say it is 4.9. Let it be. Both are positive. Our growth is positive. Yeah. So it is not combined, and also high unemployment rate. So these three should be combined for a country to reach stagflation. So I don't agree that Ethiopia is in stagflation phases, because our economy is still resilient. Despite the challenge, it is resilient, and hope that the government take more measures to make the economy more stable by expanding its the new economic reform agenda.
That's good. And my next point would be concerning some data. The World Vision reported that a 50% loss in crop productivity due to drought. Similarly, the Global Hunger Index warns there will be 40% more people in need of food assistance than in 2021, which was the peak time for COVID-19 pandemic. And on the other side, the government, as you said, just prospected 6.6% growth. Don't you think these things are paradoxical?
For me, it is not paradoxical, because we have to see that the 6.6 GDP growth tells us about economic growth, not about beneficiaries or distribution or allocations of resources to the society. Just that is a simple measurement, economic measurement tools, how to compare countries' status in economics. We have to see other measures, or human development measures, which tells us about how the socio-economic status of the populations through health, access to health, access to education, and those kinds of areas have to be also considered to see that the Ethiopian economic and development is benefiting to the people or not. We need to see it from that angle as well. But when we see the World Bank report, even while we were 10% GDP growth stage, there were 5-6 million people under drought and under starvation, and also malnutrition problem is high in Ethiopia. Stunting is high even despite the double-digit economic growth. So our focus should not be on economic growth parameter as long. We have to go beyond that. How is health is accessed by the population in the periphery, and health and education's attainment, so that people can produce, get their livelihood and self-employed and get additional resources. And the government also working how to ensure to address food insecurity problem. These challenges are directly related with food insecurity problem. That is why the World Bank also initiated 10 or more years back. This is what's called safety net program to address the vulnerable groups. That also helped even during the COVID pandemic period, that especially the urbans were benefiting, also the rurals were benefiting through that safety net programs, and they're able to really withstand the impact of the partial lockdown which Ethiopia has followed.
Well, so you have just mentioned a great deal of problems or challenges the Ethiopian economy is facing. This includes inflation, high inflation, and how can this country extricate itself from such challenges?
I think the most important is, now the government is focusing on agriculture. That's most important because we have to feed our population first. So the government is following that now, a new strategy to how to grow dry wheat during the dry season, because as you know, Ethiopian agriculture is rain-fed throughout the century. So we have to take a new paradigm shift in our policy direction to make the Ethiopian agriculture irrigation-based agriculture, besides the rainy-based agriculture. So that will help the country to produce not only wheat, even other part of other cereal crops to feed itself. As you can see that due to the Russian and Ukraine war, who produce the largest wheat and other cereal production for the world, now due to the war, there is shortage of cereals and supplies, and that hikes prices high, and inflation is aggravating everywhere in Ethiopia, not only in Ethiopia, Africa, and even in America. So that is a global phenomena. So we have to address by shifting our policy, investing in agriculture, in mechanization, also in improved seed varieties. Now there should be some kinds of policy how to really our local actors involved in such new seed varieties to not only in cereals, even in vegetables, in avocado, in papaya, in mango, and you can feed our people and export and get foreign exchange from those kinds of activities as well.
But first of all, these actors must ensure that the country has achieved food self-sufficiency.
We can reach there if we have focused really policy design and implementation as well. Not only just you will produce a policy, and if you are not implemented it, there is no value for it. So we have to work on that area, and if we do that and utilize our natural resources, we have ample land. If you go to Afar regions and Somali regions, you can see those land, uncultivated land, and you'll be surprised why we are really in poverty. So we have to do a lot to utilize our resource and produce more.
A great many people are still worrying about inflation as well as unemployment. What is your advice so that the government can alleviate these problems?
Yeah, you need to open for private sector to play its role. When you open business, business expansion creates higher employment. Higher employment will have a multiplier effect to boost the economy, and growth will come. So the problem here in our country is that it is a government monopoly. Everything is a government monopoly everywhere. So we have to change that mindset. Government alone cannot solve the problem of Ethiopia. That is period. They don't have the capacity to do that. So they have to change. They have to involve the private sector to play its role as economic engine. That needs to be addressed. You know, in that case, when we reach that cases, we can invest in agriculture, mechanization, agriculture, irrigation. So that is the way how Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, here in our Egypt have developed their economy. We are 10 or 15 years behind them always, and we are fear of something. I don't know why we are fearing. So we have to open for private sector. That is why they are growing.
Let's come to the Ethiopian homegrown economic reform agenda. What's your take on that? Since Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has come to power, has been just working, giving the attention on the homegrown economic reform agenda. And what's your evaluation on that? And how can this economic reform alleviate the country's economic challenges?
Yeah, I see it as positively because that reforms came when Ethiopia needs it. Because Ethiopia has been in a difficult position at that time. Many of the economic sector have, especially the private sectors, have been occupied by TPLF parastatals organizations, and they were playing a leading role, not the other private sector. So the reform has brought change. That is why Ethiopia able to develop resilient during the last 3 years. Despite all these challenges which we have never faced in our history, because of the change in the reform, partly played, partly the Ethiopian people really preference to be united despite all challenge that helps us to pass this really chaotic problems which we have faced. So the reform has helped because they focused, identified they made some kind of analysis during that time to address the macroeconomic imbalance following the macroeconomic stability and how to restructure and the structural economy, which priority areas should be addressed: agriculture, the mining, the tourism, the IT sector. They clearly identified, as you see, that the IT sector now playing as a digital economy. They are playing good, positive roles in the economy. If other sectors also follow that one, the telecom, like of initiatives, we can see changes in Ethiopia in the last 5-10 years. So there are a good start, but they have to review. There a lot of old things have also happened in the last 3 years. So they have to review the reform conditions again and really set new goals to achieve a new objectives in the next 5-10 years.
Okay, so you mean that although the Ethiopian homegrown economic reform has brought some positive changes, particularly when some economic giant countries have witnessed during the global pandemic season negative growth, the Ethiopian economy has just shown a positive growth. So this is basically due to the homegrown economic reform.
Reform, partly they played.
However, the government must also revise that, you are just saying.
Exactly. Still, you know, there are a lot of things they have to address. Ethiopia still, we are importing fertilizer. Why don't we prioritize our development objective and have our own fertilizer factories? Good seeds varieties for agriculture. We have to focus on those areas as well. So we have to also finish our goal, but whatever costs, because the Ethiopian peoples are united because of that. So we have to continue and build and finish and move to another project, big project.
Well, my next point is, how did you get the budget proposal for the next budget year?
In fact, I haven't seen in detail the budget, but I know that they have increased the budget, the overall budget, because Ethiopia needs expansionary fiscal policy at this stage to come out of the problem. We have to address both short-term and long-term development objectives. So I feel that it is good they have increased, but they have to also consider the inflationary problems which the Ethiopian people face.
Yeah, here my point is that the 2022-23 budget year, the government assumed an increased budget. When we see the amount, yes, it has increased from the previous year. There is a significant increase. But when we see the inflation, the budget increase is said to mean none. Do you agree with that?
No. When you spend more, it has an impact, the pressure on the economy again, on the inflation side. But it is good they have increased the budget, considering the Ethiopian conditions, because Ethiopia has a challenge, a war threat, both internal and external. We have to make ready for that, because peace and security is the first priority for a nation. So they have to prioritize that. I completely agree for that. But they have to also consider the current economic condition of inflationary impact of the spending. So I hope they will work greatly to address those issues as well. They are now contemplating to take different kinds of measures to address this one on the subsidy. Right. So they have to think broadly how to address the inflationary aspect of the budget expansion by the government.
There are issues like the resettlement of people in Amhara, Afar, and Benshangul Gumuz, Oromia regions, and also the rebuilding of social infrastructure destroyed due to war, including in Tigray region. And it has got this assignment it has got the inflation assignment. So how do you see the allocation of a significant portion of the budget to the capital budget sector?
I think we have to see this comprehensively. We have to address this humanitarian challenge, both in the short term and in the long term. In the long term, we have to build the economy which can overcome these challenges as well. So, we know that during the war, hospitals, schools destroyed. You can't build this school and hospitals once. We have to really plan it well, how to address it, both in the short term and in the long term. So the budget allocations, I haven't seen the detail of the budget, how much capital is, the budget is allocated for the capital projects, also how much for a new capital project. I haven't seen this one. But I hope the government see both the short term and the long term implications of the budget allocation. I hope they will not allocate for those luxury types of capital expenditure. I presume they will use it, the capital budget, for important projects which help bring the Ethiopian productive capacity in the long term, in the tourism, in mining, and in agriculture, and in the manufacture sector. I think those are the areas which I expect they will invest some of the portion of the budgets.
Well, so what measures should the government take so that the implementation of new budget may not be impacted by the inflation, the already high inflation?
Yeah, it will impact not only Ethiopian economy, even the American economy is impacted by inflation. And the Fed is now planning to revisit interest rates. So our governments need to do different measures and different controlling mechanism, and also really invest more on agriculture to increase productivity and production to address inflation. This is a main important area we have to invest. Otherwise, now the foreign assistance is declining. So we have to really see our economy internally and invest more and work with the people and really motivate people to work and diversify their income. That is how we will address the problem internally instead of depending on external assistance.
Well, that's good. And now let's turn our attention to the Russian-Ukraine war and its impact on the African economies. In what areas do you think are the major impacts are being felt across African economy?
Yeah, when you see the Ukraine and Russia, they are the main producer of cereal crops like wheat, maize, and they are the largest exporter in the world. And in food oils, fuels, and metal products, they are the main producers and exporters. And we are also importers from these two countries. So the blockage during the war created a shortage of supplies, both in food and non-food materials. So Africans are highly depending on foreign imports. So this is a big lesson for Africa and Ethiopia as well. So we have to really see how to utilize our resource and natural resource endowment and human resource endowment to really increase production and productivity in this area. And we have to utilize the opportunity created by African free trade, continental free trade area, which signed last 2 years or years back. So we have to work on that, how to cooperate with African countries, with our neighbors, and building infrastructure and really benefit from that trade agreement, free trade agreement.
The World Vision warns that some 45 million people across 43 countries may starve to horrendous consequences. How can Africa overcome this challenge?
Yeah, the natural disaster like drought has really causing conflict. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yes, we have to really collaborate with African countries to utilize our resource and better plan how to address these things, how to first of all to build peace and security in Africa. We have to really minimize the factor which causes conflict in our borders. So we have to minimize those kinds of things and work together and spend the resource on productive investment than non-productive investment on war. So towards that we have to work hard and we have to build the real democracy in Africa so that people can freely work and move and capital can move and labor can move within Africa freely and goods can freely move and benefit for economic integration. So we have to focus to follow the right policies, parameters, so that Africa stand competitively in the world market. That is the most important policy area they have to follow. Instead of making every month a coup d'etat in every country, we have to go. They have to build the capacity of their farmers and they have to invest in agriculture. Unless you invest in education and educate the farmers and their children and address, how to mechanize their agriculture system and to increase the productivity of their farm. So far, we are focusing on productivity of the land only. We have to focus also the productivity of the human factor as well. So both, when we work on both productivity of the land and productivity of the farmers, then we can bring changes on agricultural yields in the economy. So African people, really, governments need to focus on investing on agriculture, really, and liberalize their market so that we can freely move, capital move within the continent and the labor move with the continent freely and enhance our intra-Africa trade. That will help to increase income and bring competitiveness in the international market. That's how we can develop the economy in Africa. Without addressing that, it is difficult to imagine.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Addis Kassaun, for joining ETV English Special Edition.
Thank you very much for the opportunity you have given us. We appreciate.
Dear viewers, this has been the conversation with Dr. Addis Kassaun, who is Chief Economist, and we talked a lot of issues regarding the challenges the Ethiopian economy is facing and what should be done to alleviate the country's economy from such challenges. And we also just try to see the economic impacts of Russia-Ukraine war on African economies. Thank you so much for joining me, and see you another time. I'm Sintayo Tamarat with this program.